Atlas Innovations. My father's legacy, my brother's crown. A fortress of glass and steel built on the back of his genius. And me? I'm just Lena, a 38-year-old business strategist who spends her days in the periphery, in the shadows of the golden sun. Adam, the CEO, the face of the company, and the one who always got to stand in the spotlight. He was my father's pride and joy, the one he handed the keys to. I was the overlooked daughter, the one whose brilliance was always seen as a supportive role, never the lead. I had accepted it, or at least I had pretended to. For years, I played my part as the loyal sister, the silent strategist who kept the gears turning while Adam took all the credit. And then there's Sarah, Adam's wife. She's all designer dresses and effortless charm, a socialite who could talk her way into any room. But beneath that polished veneer, I've always seen a hint of something else, a glint of steel in her eyes that reminds me of a snake. When she and Adam married, she was an elegant addition to our family's public image. Now she's an elegant parasite. Slowly but surely, she's been sinking her teeth into the company's finances, a little here, a little there, all under the guise of modernizing and streamlining. I've watched the quarterly reports, the financial statements, the subtle shifts in our investment portfolio. She's smart, I'll give her that. She knows how to hide it, but I know numbers, and I know patterns. This isn't just her being a savvy businesswoman. This is a systematic draining of our family's most valuable asset. My father's company, my birthright. The deep-seated suspicion I've harbored for years has now curdled into a cold, hard certainty. I've tried to talk to Adam about it, to hint at what I've been seeing. He just laughs it off, saying I'm paranoid that Sarah is a genius. She's just thinking ahead, Lena, he'd say, a look of blind faith on his face. He's so utterly devoted to her that he's become a willing pawn in her game. I can't let her dismantle everything my father built. I won't. I'm going to have to do this myself. And I'm going to have to do it from the shadows. The only place I've ever been allowed to exist. My silence has been my cage, but now I'm going to make it my weapon. The sterile hum of the hospital room was the only constant. My mother, Elena, looked impossibly small in the bed, the blankets pulled up to her chin. The machines beeped a slow, mournful rhythm. I sat in a chair by the window, my hands clenched in my lap, feeling the familiar crushing weight of impending loss. Adam stood by the bed, his back to me, holding her hand. Adam. Her voice was a papery whisper, barely audible over the machines. There's something you need to know. It can't go with me. He turned slightly, his gaze full of a love that was a knife to my heart. What is it, Mom? You can tell me anything. Leo is not your son. The words hung in the air, a venomous cloud settling over us. The beeping of the machine seemed to stop, if only in my head. My breath caught in my throat. I watched Adam's back stiffen, his shoulders going rigid with a kind of shock that was more than just surprise. It was a physical blow. My mother's eyes, clouded with pain and morphine, found mine across the room. I felt a surge of panic. Why now? Why did she have to do this now? She couldn't see the silent plea in my eyes, the desperate prayer for her to take it back. The father, it was Sarah's ex-husband. Her words were a jagged shard of glass, cutting through the last vestiges of our family's peace. I gasped, a small involuntary sound that broke the silence. My ex-husband? The man who had been nothing but a ghost in our lives for years? The man whose very name was a stain on my past? How could she have kept this a secret for so long? For decades, we had all believed. Adam had loved Leo with a fierce, unwavering devotion that was now, in an instant, a lie. Adam finally turned, and his face was a mask of pure agony. His eyes met mine, not with accusation, but with a horrifying blank bewilderment. He didn't know what to do, what to say. Our world had just been turned upside down, and I was just as helpless as he was. My mother's grip on his hand tightened one last time. Her eyes fluttered shut, and her voice, now barely a ghost of a sound, delivered her final command. Protect our family. The machines are flatlined. The sudden shrill alarm was the last sound I heard before the world went quiet. My mother was gone, but the ghost she had conjured, the horrific secret she had revealed, remained. Adam stood there unmoving, the words "protect our family" a terrible burden now. I watched him, my heart breaking for him, for Leo, for the family that was now a crumbling edifice of lies. What were we supposed to do now? What did protecting our family even mean? The scent of wilting lilies and stale coffee still hung in the air, a cruel reminder of the funeral. I sat across from Adam in the quiet library, the mahogany desk between us like a barrier. Mr. Davies, Mother's lawyer, cleared his throat, his face a mask of practiced solemnity. "There's just one final matter." He placed a thick manila envelope on the desk. "These are for you, Adam, your mother's last wish." My brother's hands trembled as he opened it. I leaned forward, feigning concern, my stomach clenching with a manufactured dread. Inside were documents, folded and crisp, along with a handwritten letter from Mother. As he read the pages, his face went from pale to ashen. His eyes, full of grief just a moment ago, now held a bewildered horror. "I don't understand," he whispered, his voice cracking. He looked up at me, his gaze searching, desperate. "This can't be right." I took the papers from his shaking hands, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm in my chest. The documents detailed a shocking paternity claim, a lie spun with such meticulous detail that it could only have been Mother's work. My eyes scanned the words, feigning shock. But inside, I felt a surge of cold satisfaction. The lie was perfect. It would tear his life apart, just as she had intended. "Oh, Adam," I said, my voice thick with a carefully crafted sorrow. "Who would do this? Why?" I met his gaze, my eyes wide with what I hoped was convincing devastation. "The dates. They line up with when you and Sarah first met. She must have done this." His face crumpled, a tear finally escaping and tracing a path down his cheek. "Sarah? No. She wouldn't. She couldn't. She loves me." He looked from the papers to me, his beautiful, heartbreaking tableau of confusion and despair. "This is a lie." "It has to be," I agreed, my hand finding his, my touch meant to convey a sisterly bond, a shared tragedy. But in my mind, the words were a silent promise. This lie was the beginning of the end for Sarah. Mother had seen her as a threat, a woman who had come between her and her son, and now, even from the grave, she was tearing them apart. The lawyer watched us, his expression unreadable. I looked back at Adam, my face a mask of sympathy, and gave his hand a reassuring squeeze. The game had begun. How long would it take for the lie to fully take hold and destroy his life? The house felt hollow without Sarah's vibrant, terrible energy. It was a silence that used to be a source of solace, but now it was a deafening reminder of everything we had lost. I found Adam in the library, a room he'd always avoided. He sat in his father's old armchair, a glass of amber liquid clutched in his hand, a look of utter desolation on his face. "She's really gone," he said, his voice a raw whisper. "She took everything, Mia, the paintings, the jewelry, the family silver. My God, she even took Dad's old watch collection." My stomach churned, but I forced my face into a mask of sympathetic concern. I walked over to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. He flinched, and then leaned into my touch, a broken man seeking comfort from the only person left to him. "I'm so sorry, Adam," I said, my voice soft and soothing. "I can't even imagine what you're going through." "I just don't understand," he said, his eyes welling up with tears. "We were a family. I loved her, Mia. I loved her so much." "I know," I said, my voice thick with false emotion. "But she never loved you." "Not really. She loved the money, the prestige, the lifestyle. She loved what you could give her, not who you were." He looked up at me, his eyes wide and clouded with pain. "Do you really think so?" "Of course I do," I said, my voice hardening just a little. "Look at what she did, Adam. She didn't just leave you. She plundered our family legacy. That wasn't an act of a woman in love. It was an act of greed. She's a thief." He nodded slowly, the truth of my words settling over him like a shroud. "She's a thief," he repeated, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "We will get through this," I said, my grip on his shoulder tightening. "We will get justice. We will make her pay for what she did." He finally broke down, the sobs racking his body. I held him, stroking his hair, a tableau of a loving sister comforting her broken brother. But inside I felt nothing. No empathy, no love, only a cold, hard satisfaction. The first seed of my plan had been planted, and it was already taking root. The thought of Sarah, wherever she was, with whatever little she had managed to take, filled me with a quiet fury. I had to get it back, all of it, and I would stop at nothing to get it. I would not rest until every last piece of my family's legacy was back where it belonged. I had to be strong for both of us. He was a fool, a broken, pathetic fool, but he was my fool, and he would be the key to getting everything back. What came next, I knew, would be even more difficult. We had to find her. The thought sent a jolt of ice through my veins. It was the last thing I wanted, but it was the first thing I had to do. The question was how. Adam sat across from me, his face a mask of worry. He kept running a hand through his hair, a nervous habit he'd never been able to shake. "I just don't know what to do," he said, the words heavy with a desperation that was almost pitiable. "Sarah, she's changed. Everything is about money, about the business. I don't even know her anymore." "I know, Adam," I said, my voice soft, laced with a sympathy I didn't feel. I reached across the table and placed my hand over his, a gesture of comfort that was really just another layer of my manipulation. "I've been so worried about you." He looked at me, his eyes searching. "Do you really think a divorce is the only way? The only way to protect what's yours?" I said, my tone firm but not aggressive. "To protect the family business. It's the only way to get her to show her true colors. She's like a predator. You can't see what she's hunting until you take away her cover." I let the words hang in the air for a moment, letting him process the idea. He was a good man, a simple man who wanted to believe the best in everyone. But that naivete was what had made him so vulnerable to a woman like Sarah. I slid a sleek, unassuming folder across the table toward him. I had a decoy financial audit drawn up, a preliminary look at the company's assets, what she might be entitled to in a divorce. "It's a bit of a trick, I know, but it's the bait we need to lure her out." He opened the folder, his brow furrowed as he scanned the numbers, which were, of course, entirely fabricated. The document was a masterpiece, a beautifully crafted lie designed to appeal to Sarah's greed. It showed a path for her to seize a substantial portion of the company's assets, a golden goose she'd be unable to resist. "This is a huge risk," Adam whispered, his voice barely audible. "It is," I agreed, a slow, confident smile spreading across my face. "But it's a calculated one. We're not just filing for divorce. We're setting a trap, and I have a feeling that once she sees this, she'll walk right into it." I watched him as he stared at the document, the gears turning in his head. The bait was set. Now we just had to wait for her to take it. And I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, she would. The scent of stale coffee and desperation hung in the air of the lawyer's office, a grim backdrop for what was about to unfold. I sat across from my brother's wife, Sarah, my hands folded tightly in my lap, trying to project a facade of weary grief. The truth was, every nerve in my body was humming with anticipation. I had set the stage. Now I just had to wait for her to play her part. The initial phone calls had been an Oscar-worthy performance from her, a flood of crocodile tears and, "Oh my God, what are we going to do?" She had played the heartbroken widow so convincingly, I almost believed it myself. But I knew better. I had seen the way her eyes lingered on the family company's financial reports. I knew what she really mourned wasn't him, but the sudden closing of her bank account. "This is also difficult," Sarah said, her voice a thin, reedy sound that grated on my nerves. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, a gesture that seemed more theatrical than sincere. "I just can't believe he's gone." The lawyer, a sharp-featured woman named Mrs. Thorne, cleared her throat. "I understand this is a sensitive time, but we need to discuss the future of the company." I nodded gravely. "Of course." My brother wouldn't have wanted us to fall apart. That was the cue. I saw the shift in Sarah's posture, the way her shoulders squared. The tears were gone, replaced by a steely glint in her eyes. The actress was gone. The predator had arrived. "I've been doing some thinking," she said, her voice firmer now. "As his wife, I'm entitled to a significant portion of the assets. The company, the house. I need to make sure I'm taken care of. I've hired my own lawyer, Mr. Davidson, to represent me." I forced a look of shock and hurt onto my face, but inside, a quiet satisfaction began to bloom. This was it. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment she confirmed every one of my suspicions. My brother had been so blind, so swept up in her performance. He never saw the real her. "Sarah, how can you even think about money at a time like this?" I said, my voice trembling with feigned disbelief. She didn't flinch. "I have to think about my future," she said, and then added with a chilling smile, "It's what he would have wanted." The gall of it was breathtaking. I could feel my own righteous fury rising, but I quickly tamped it down. The time for anger was later. For now, I just had to nod and pretend to be the grieving, horrified sister, a victim of her sister-in-law's monstrous greed. This was exactly what I had been counting on. I just had to make sure the evidence I had been collecting would be enough to bring her down. The air in my Aunt Carol's living room was thick with a heavy, floral perfume and an even heavier silence. My family, Sarah's family, sat scattered around the room like statues in a museum of grief. They'd come to comfort me, or so I thought. Instead, their eyes held a different kind of sympathy. Pity for me, yes, but also a deep-seated belief that I was the reason for all this. I could feel their collective judgment, a silent wave crashing over me. My Aunt Carol, Sarah's mother, was the first to speak. "This is all Adam's doing," she said, her voice shaking. She looked at me, her eyes red-rimmed and accusing. He's always been so fragile. I knew he couldn't handle the stress of the business. My cousin David nodded in agreement. He had a complete breakdown, an emotional spiral. "You must have pushed him over the edge, Claire." A part of me wanted to laugh. Pushed him over the edge? If they only knew. But I simply lowered my gaze, a picture of shame and sorrow. "I don't know what to think anymore," I whispered, my voice barely audible. I just wanted to help him. I let the tears well up in my eyes, a silent testament to my manufactured heartbreak. The lie was a bitter pill to swallow, but it was essential. Each lie I told, each tear I shed was a crucial piece of my plan. It was the foundation of the victim I had built for them. They had to believe I was as lost and confused as they were. They had to believe I was one of them, a victim of Adam's supposed madness. I stood up and went to my aunt, wrapping my arms around her. "I'm so sorry, Aunt Carol," I said, my voice thick with false emotion. "I should have seen the signs. I should have done more to help him." She patted my back, her tears soaking into my sweater. "It's not your fault, darling. He's just a broken man, and he's dragged Sarah down with him." They were blaming Adam just as I had hoped. The narrative was taking root, spreading through the family like a weed. With every passing moment, my position as a trusting, heartbroken sister grew stronger. I had them exactly where I wanted them. I had convinced them that Adam was a madman, and I was a poor, innocent victim. My pieces were moving, and soon it would be time for the next step. I wondered how long it would be before they realized the monster wasn't Adam at all. The scent of freshly printed paper filled my office, a clean, crisp smell that was the perfect counterpoint to the tangled mess of my emotions. The old me, the one who'd trusted every smile and every empty promise, would be heartbroken by what I was doing. The new me, forged in the fires of betrayal, simply saw it as an elegant solution. The final pieces of my trap were laid out before me, a symphony of lies meticulously orchestrated to expose Sarah for what she was. I ran a finger over the title of the document. Project Phoenix, a new dawn for Hayes Industries. A cheesy name, but I knew it would be a siren song for her. The fake business proposal promised an aggressive, high-risk expansion that would be irresistible to her insatiable ambition. It was designed to make her believe she could double the company's valuation overnight, a fantasy I knew she'd snatch up without a second thought. Beside it lay the financial audit, a document so full of subtle, planted errors that it looked legitimate to a cursory glance, but would crumble under any real scrutiny. The beauty of it was that it appeared to validate my proposal, giving her the false confidence she'd need to move on the third piece of my bait, the fake meeting notice. I took a deep breath and slid the paper into a folder marked confidential. The fake meeting with the board of directors was scheduled for next Tuesday, a date that would give her just enough time to panic, to scramble, to convince herself she could steal my idea and present it as her own. On my desk, watching her eyes flicker with barely concealed interest, the bait was in the water. She couldn't resist. "I'd love to take a look at it sometime," she said, her smile tightening just a bit. "Of course," I replied, the lie sliding from my lips as easily as breathing. "But I'm heading out now. It's been a long day." I stood, picking up the folder, and then, as if by accident, I let it slide from my grasp. It landed with a soft thud on the floor, the cover of the fake proposal peeking out. "Oh, clumsy me." She bent down to help, her hand hovering over the document. The hunger in her eyes was palpable. "Don't worry," I said, retrieving it before she could. "I'll see you in the morning." As I walked away, I felt her gaze on my back, a hawk circling its prey. She had no idea the prey was a spider, and she had just walked into the center of my web. Now, all that was left was to wait for her to spin. The sterile silence of Mr. Caldwell's office was suffocating, a stark contrast to the buzzing dread in my head. The air smelled of old paper and indifference. I slid the worn folder across his desk, the sound a low scrape against the polished wood. My hands were shaking, a betrayal of the fragile composure I was trying so hard to maintain. "I found these," I said, my voice barely a whisper. The words felt hollow, a flimsy bridge between my grief and this new, crushing reality. In a box, tucked away in my mother's things. They're not right." Caldwell, a man whose face was as impassive as his office, took the folder and opened it. He barely even glanced at the papers before looking at me. "What isn't right, Sarah?" "The dates," I stammered, pointing a trembling finger at the forged signature on the deed. And the signature, it's a lie. My mother, all this time, she was lying to me. My throat constricted, the truth a bitter pill I couldn't swallow. She had spent her life telling me she'd left us everything, that our future was secure. To find this now after everything else, it was too much. It was a second loss, a final brutal deception. Caldwell's gaze was unsettlingly calm. He closed the folder with a quiet finality and leaned forward, his elbows on the desk. I understand this is difficult, but we have to be careful. If we act now, if we move too fast, they will know we're onto them. My heart hammered against my ribs. Them? Who is them? And what do you mean, careful? My life is falling apart. My husband is gone, and now I find out my own mother cheated me. I have nothing left. The words tumbled out, raw and unfiltered. This wasn't an act. It was a plea. He held up a hand, a gesture of quiet authority that only served to infuriate me further. They are watching, Sarah. People are invested in this deception. We can't show our hand yet. It will raise suspicion. You have to go on as you have been. You have to... Wait for what? I asked, the question laced with a rising panic. For them to take everything I have left? He met my eyes, and for a fleeting moment, I saw something in their depths I couldn't quite place. A glint of calculation, or maybe just pure strategy. For the perfect moment, he said, his voice low and firm. When they make their move, when they get greedy, that's when we strike. I stared at him, feeling more alone than I had in months. The lawyer I had trusted, my last hope, was telling me to stand by and do nothing. To continue living this lie, to pretend I was just a victim. But a victim of what, I wondered? Just one man? Or was there something far, far bigger at play? And could I really trust this man, this calm, cold confidant, to guide me through it? The hum of the fluorescent lights above us was the only sound in the sterile conference room. But inside my head, a clock was ticking, a relentless, deafening countdown to my own ruin. I clutched the armrests of my chair so tightly my knuckles ached, my eyes darting between Adam's pale face and Sarah's cool, composed smile. She was a predator, and I was her prey, sitting right in the middle of her kill zone. It's simple, really, Sarah said, her voice dripping with condescension as she slid a thick stack of papers across the polished table. Adam's mismanagement has already put us in a precarious position. The board will be desperate for a solution. My proposal will not only save the company from bankruptcy, but will also put us on a new, more profitable path. I read the title of the document. A Hostile Takeover, the Sarah Jenkins Contingency Plan. A wave of nausea hit me. She was doing it. She was openly moving against Adam, against everything he and his family had built. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic trapped bird. I looked at Adam, and the look of sheer devastation on his face was a mirror of my own. He was truly broken. My hands trembled, a genuine, uncontrollable tremor. What was I going to do? And my role? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I had to play along, pretend I was still a part of their miserable little game. Sarah leaned back in her chair, a smug glint in her eyes. You, my dear, will be my right hand, a figurehead of sorts, the one who sells my vision to the public. Don't worry, she added, a chilling smile on her face. You'll be well compensated. I'll make sure you don't end up on the street with the rest of them. A cold dread seeped into my bones. Her words were a death sentence. She wasn't just planning to take over the company. She was planning to destroy Adam and everyone who stood with him, including me. She saw me not as a partner but as a puppet, a prop. I watched her, a knot of pure fear tightening in my stomach. Her actions, so brash and brazen, seemed like a series of reckless leaps off a cliff, but they were calculated. She was convinced they would work. A notification chimed on Adam's phone. He looked at it, and then at me, his eyes wide with a new kind of panic. He didn't speak. He just slid the phone across the table. It was a news alert, a headline about a sudden, unexpected drop in our stock price. A drop so severe it could only have been caused by deliberate manipulation. I felt my breath catch in my throat. This wasn't part of the plan. This was her move, and she was playing a different game entirely. Had I misjudged her? Had she already outsmarted me? The clock was still ticking, but now I had no idea what it was counting down to. The flashbulbs were like 1,000 tiny suns, burning my eyes as Sarah stood at the podium. My brother Adam has been suffering from a severe mental health crisis, she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. He's not himself, and his recent actions have jeopardized the future of Atlas Innovations. A murmur went through the crowd. This was it, the moment she twisted my own knife against me. She gestured to a large screen behind her, and my proposal, the decoy I'd spent weeks crafting, appeared. The detailed but ultimately worthless plan to rebrand Atlas was on full display. "This is just one example of his erratic decision-making," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "A desperate, half-baked attempt to tear down the very company our father built. But I won't let him. I have a plan to save us all." The room erupted in applause. My stomach twisted into a knot. I knew what she was doing, what she was showing everyone, and yet I couldn't stop it. Later, I sat in the hushed, empty living room of my childhood home. The news was on, a split screen showing Sarah's triumphant face next to a blurry photo of me, looking defeated. A victim. My parents sat opposite me, their faces a mix of confusion and pity. "Adam," my mother started, her voice soft. "We heard what she said. About your health." My father nodded slowly, his eyes full of concern. "This is a serious problem, son. Maybe it's time to step back and let Sarah fix this." They didn't even question it. They truly believed her. Believed their own son was losing his mind. I wanted to scream, to tell them that the person they were trusting was the real threat. But I couldn't. I had to maintain the charade. I just nodded, a single fake tear rolling down my cheek. "I understand," I whispered, the words tasting like ash. They believed her lie, hook, line, and sinker. They believed I was broken, and that was exactly what I needed them to believe. As they left the room, their footsteps fading, I let out a long, slow breath. My head wasn't spinning, my heart wasn't breaking. It was a perfectly executed deception. The first part of my plan was complete. Sarah had taken the bait. She thought she was winning, that she was in control. She was about to find out just how wrong she was. I watched the news anchor praising her bravery and vision, a small, satisfied smile touching my lips. Let her have her fake victory. The real war hadn't even begun. The mahogany of the conference table felt cool beneath my fingertips. For weeks, I'd been clutching at anything for support. A tissue, a hand, a half-empty bottle of water. Now, I simply rested my hand on the polished surface, the gesture one of possession, not desperation. The private office was silent, the hum of the city a distant, manageable drone. Across from me, Mr. Henderson, my mother's lawyer, sat patiently. He'd seen me cry. He'd seen me shake, and he'd witnessed the devastation of the past month. He had been a perfect audience, as had everyone else. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice low and concerned. He saw a grieving daughter. I saw a pawn I was about to move. I met his gaze, a slow smile spreading across my face, a genuine one this time, free of any performance. "I've never been more ready." His confusion was immediate, a faint furrowing of his brow. He didn't have all the details, not yet. I leaned forward, the act of a confidant. "My mother's confession, the one you were forced to read out loud to my brother. We can disregard that now. It served its purpose perfectly." He stared at me, dumbfounded. The veil of the heartbroken sister had been lifted, revealing a strategist. I felt a thrill, a deep and satisfying sense of power. The tears, the grief, the shaking hands, all of it had been an act, a necessary performance to give my brother exactly what he wanted. My mother's lie about the company, her fabricated guilt over the forged documents. It was the perfect bait. My brother's greedy wife, Sarah, had pushed him to seize the opportunity, to cut me out completely and take control. He had no idea he was walking right into a trap that I'd been building for months. "The papers," I continued, a cold satisfaction in my tone. "The ones my mother claimed to have forged to give the company to him, and the ones he signed in his haste, they're real. And they're the key to everything." I gestured to the briefcase at my feet, the one filled with the actual legal documents. He just signed away his half of the company to me. The real game was never about inheritance. It was about exposing Sarah and taking back what was rightfully ours. Henderson's eyes widened, a flicker of professional admiration in them. He understood now. The plan had been meticulous, a chess game played over years. I had just checkmated them both. He reached for a file, his hands moving with renewed purpose. "So we proceed with the filing? He won't even know what he's done until the ink is dry." "Exactly," I said, a grin playing on my lips. "And once he does, I have another document that will give him one last chance to do the right thing if he chooses me over his wife. I'm leaving nothing to chance." This was it. The moment I had been waiting for. the moment I had been meticulously building towards. The team was assembled, a collection of the sharpest legal minds and most discreet private investigators money could buy. They sat around the mahogany table in my father's old study, a room where I'd spent countless hours pretending to be nothing more than the dutiful daughter, the silent strategist. Now I was finally able to speak my truth. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steady and clear. "I believe you've been given a summary of the situation." A man named Marcus, a seasoned investigator with kind eyes and a face that held no secrets, nodded. "The outline suggests your brother, Adam, and his wife, Sarah, are attempting to push you out of the family business. It's a messy corporate battle, standard stuff." I allowed myself a small, secretive smile. That's what they want everyone to believe, but that's not the whole story. Sarah isn't just trying to force me out. She's trying to dismantle the entire company from the inside out. I looked at them, letting the words sink in. She's been siphoning funds, creating shell companies, and making strategic moves to devalue the company so she can take it over. This isn't just about a power play. It's about exposing a criminal conspiracy. A young lawyer named Chloe, her expression a mix of skepticism and intrigue, leaned forward. "Exposing her is one thing, but how do we prove it? Adam is the CEO. He's the one signing off on these transactions. He's her puppet," I explained, the words feeling foreign and powerful on my tongue. "He's so blinded by her supposed love that he'll do anything she asks. My true plan is to bait her, to make her think she's winning. We need to create a situation where she feels so secure in her control that she'll make a mistake. A big one." The room fell silent as they processed the information. I could see the gears turning in their heads, the shift in their perspective. They had come here to fight a corporate battle, but I had just recruited them for a war. "So what's our first move?" Marcus asked, his voice low and serious. "We start tracking her. Every move, every phone call, every shady meeting. We build a case so airtight, so undeniable, that when she finally makes her move, we're ready. She's confident, maybe even a little arrogant. We're going to use that against her. We're going to let her think she's in control while we pull the strings." I let the last words hang in the air, a silent promise. My game was finally beginning. The call was a masterpiece of misdirection. I spoke in a hushed, trembling voice, a concerned friend worried about a vulnerable public figure. She's not who everyone thinks she is," I said, my voice cracking with feigned emotion. "The watches aren't the whole story. Her past, her finances. It's all a house of cards. The reporter on the other end, a vulture named Sterling, ate it up. He loved a good fall from grace. And Sarah's public adoration was a pedestal just begging to be toppled. I fed him little morsels of truth, perfectly twisted into lies. She had significant debts of her own. The picture she paints of a humble, grieving heir, it's not accurate. She's far more clever than she lets on." I let a long pause hang in the air, the silence a calculated weight. My mind, however, was a whirlwind of calm satisfaction. It was working. The public loved a victim, but they loved a villain even more. All I had to do was show them the puppet strings. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was creating the very public relations nightmare that I was trying to warn them about. The media would do the heavy lifting for me, and their scrutiny would be 1,000 times more effective than any direct accusation from me. Later that afternoon, a headline from Sterling's publication popped up on my phone. "Is Sarah's grief just a performance?" I scrolled through the comments, a slow, malicious grin spreading across my face. I always thought she was a little too perfect. Why didn't she ever talk about her own financial issues? Something's fishy here. This whole thing feels like a setup. She's playing us. The seeds of doubt were taking root just as I had planned. Their initial blind faith in her was now curdling into suspicion. The public had turned on her, their love now a weapon aimed squarely at her back. Hands, the very hands that had orchestrated this entire symphony of betrayal, were clean. I was just a worried friend. The first domino had fallen, and the rest would follow in perfect sequence. The media was a blunt instrument, a battering ram that would weaken her fortress of lies. But it wasn't the endgame. The real move would be when the legal proceedings began, when all these doubts and whispers had a name, when they could be used in court. I closed my eyes, picturing the pieces on my chessboard. The king was exposed, and I was about to make my final move. The media was just the opening gambit. What came next would be decisive. The low hum of the law firm's air conditioning was the only sound in the polished office. I sat across from Mr. Harrison, his face a careful mask of professional neutrality as he reviewed the final documents. This wasn't a meeting born of desperation, but of careful calculation. This was the opening act of my play, and I was the star. "The lawsuit is ready to be filed, Ms. Thorne," Mr. Harrison said, sliding a thick stack of papers toward me. "The claims of fraud and corporate espionage are strong, thanks to the evidence you've compiled." His gaze was sharp, a sliver of curiosity glinting in his eyes. He didn't know the full story, of course. He only knew what I had allowed him to see. A victimized businesswoman, a grieving daughter, wronged by her deceitful sister-in-law. I picked up a fountain pen, the cool metal a comforting weight in my hand. It's a long process, isn't it, Stephen? Legal battles like this can take months, even years. They can, he agreed, his tone cautious. But we have a solid case. The financial discrepancies, the forged signatures on those transfer documents, it all points to her. We'll depose her, we'll expose her lies, it will be a public nightmare for her. A slow private smile bloomed inside me. That's exactly what I want, I said, my voice as calm and steady as a lake on a windless day. The documents were a masterpiece, a tapestry of deceit woven with threads I had spun myself. The financial records I had discovered were just a few clicks away from being my own. But a single, carefully altered date and an anonymous email had pointed the finger squarely at Sarah. My knowledge of the company's inner workings wasn't a burden to be protected. It was a weapon to be wielded. "We will file first thing tomorrow morning," Mr. Harrison confirmed. "She won't see it coming." "Oh, I think she will," I murmured, more to myself than to him. I had made sure of it. I had left little hints, a few dropped words to her colleagues, a trail of breadcrumbs that would lead her to believe I was a cornered animal, lashing out wildly. She would be preparing for a brawl, a messy, disorganized fight. She would not be prepared for the carefully planned surgical strike I was about to unleash. This legal battle wasn't just about winning. It was about destroying her, piece by piece, in front of the world. I signed the last document with a flourish. The ink was barely dry, and the trap was already set. The long, drawn-out process wasn't a consequence. It was the entire point. It gave me more time, more opportunities to watch her squirm, and I was going to enjoy every single moment of it. I sat at the head of the long mahogany table, the seat my father had always occupied. The air in the boardroom was thick with anticipation, a scent I had come to savor. It was the smell of a trap well laid, of a plan finally coming to fruition. I'd sent the invitations myself, a simple, formal email requesting a meeting to resolve the recent matter of the company's reputation and financial stability. They all walked into the lion's den blind as lambs. First, Sarah and Adam arrived together. He looked ashen, his face a roadmap of sleepless nights and regret. I had planted the seeds of his downfall, and now he was harvesting the bitter crop of my revenge. Sarah, on the other hand, was all sharp angles and defensive posture. Her eyes darted around the room, suspicion etched into every line of her face. She knew something was wrong, but she had no idea the full extent of my machinations. They sat on opposite sides of the table, a stark visual representation of a relationship already shattered. The board members filed in next, a collection of tired faces in conservative suits. They represented the old guard, the same men who had once looked down on me and my sister, who had always seen us as little more than accessories to the family business. Now, they were my captive audience. They thought we were here to discuss Mark's latest public relations nightmare, a direct result of my anonymous exposé. They thought they were here to mediate. They were wrong. I clasped my hands together on the table, the cool wood a satisfying anchor. This was the final act, the culmination of months of patient manipulation. I had played the victim, the heartbroken sister, the wronged wife. I had fed them crumbs of information, just enough to make them feel in control, to make them believe they were the ones pulling the strings. It was all a prelude to this moment. They had built the gallows themselves, and now I was about to give them the rope. I met Adam's eyes first, a look of cold, hard satisfaction replacing my usual mask of concern. He flinched, his brow furrowing in confusion. Then I looked at Sarah, a ghost of a smile playing on my lips. Her defiance wavered, a flicker of true fear in her eyes. It was time. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice clear and steady. "I've called this meeting to get to the bottom of the theft that has plagued our family and company. A theft that I believe was orchestrated by someone in this very room." My palms were slick with sweat, the cool glass of water in my hand doing nothing to calm the frantic thrum of my pulse. All eyes were on me. The board members, a dozen stone-faced suits, sat around the polished mahogany table, their expressions a mixture of impatience and professional curiosity. Adam sat beside me, oblivious. He just thought I was here to provide moral support, to stand by his side as he announced the divorce. He had no idea what I was about to do. "Thank you all for being here," I began, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. "Before Adam makes his announcement, I have something I need to share with you all. It concerns the future of this company and a past betrayal." I saw Sarah sitting at the far end of the table, stiff, her eyes narrowed, a flicker of warning crossing her face. She knew this wasn't part of the plan. Adam, still clueless, gave my hand a gentle squeeze under the table, a reassuring gesture. I took a deep breath, looking at each face in the room. My mother, as many of you know, was the one who built this company with your father, Adam. But what you don't know is that she never intended for Sarah to be a part of it. A hushed murmur rippled through the room. Sarah's face was now a mask of cold fury. "What are you talking about?" she snapped, her voice sharp. "That's a lie, is it?" I asked, my voice rising slightly. I pulled a document from my briefcase, a thick file with a red stamp. "These are the original founding papers of this company. My mother's signature is here, and so is my father's, but a third signature is conspicuously absent." I slid the file across the table to Adam, who stared at it in disbelief. Sarah was never meant to be a partner. My mother created fake papers to give her a small share of the company, a way to keep her quiet, a way to prevent her from revealing a terrible family secret. But she took advantage of that small share, and she used it to manipulate Adam and get him to hand over full control. The silence in the room was deafening. Adam's face was ashen, his eyes wide with a dawning horror as he looked from the document to Sarah, then back to me. He'd been betrayed, not just by his wife, but by his own mother. The realization was a gut punch, and he just sat there, speechless. Sarah, however, wasn't. "You bitch!" she shrieked, jumping to her feet, her chair scraping against the floor. "This isn't over. I'll ruin you!" I just smiled. "I know," I said, a look of pure, unadulterated pleasure on my face. "But by then it will be too late. The trap is sprung." The phone call came just as I was pouring myself a cup of tea. The gentle steam a stark contrast to the icy certainty that had settled in my stomach. It was Mrs. Thorne, my lawyer, her voice crisp and professional. "It's done," she said. "The police have arrested Sarah. The evidence we provided was more than enough." I didn't say anything for a moment, just gripped the phone, a small, triumphant smile playing on my lips. My heart wasn't pounding. It wasn't a rush of adrenaline. It was a calm, steady beat, the rhythm of a job well done. The last few weeks had been a marathon of deception, of playing the grieving sister to the hilt while I quietly, meticulously, laid every piece of my trap. I had watched her flail, watched her greed consume her, all while I sat back and waited for the perfect moment. "I'll be in touch with the board," Mrs. Thorne continued. "With her out of the picture, we can finalize your appointment as CEO. The company is yours again." "Thank you," I managed to say, the words feeling foreign after so much time spent feigning grief. "Thank you for everything." I hung up and just stood there, the weight of 1,000 secrets lifting off my shoulders. I thought back to the day of my brother's funeral, to the way Sarah had so brazenly tried to seize control, her every move a transparent grab for power. I hadn't been a weeping widow, but I had been a grieving sister, grieving for my brother, and the fact that he had been so blind. Now it is over. Sarah was facing charges for fraud and corporate espionage, 2 things I had carefully orchestrated her to commit. My plan had been so simple, so elegant. I'd given her just enough rope to hang herself, and she had gleefully taken it. The staged bank accounts, the false documents, the anonymous tips I had sent to the board of directors. It was all a symphony of revenge, and she had conducted it for me without even knowing. With Sarah gone, the company board, who had been my silent allies in this charade, was ready to fall in line. I would be back where I belonged, at the head of my family's legacy. It wasn't just a victory, it was a reclamation. I walked over to the window and looked out at the city skyline, a landscape I would soon be in full control of. The tea was getting cold, but I didn't mind. The warmth I felt inside was more than enough. My brother was gone, but his legacy was safe. And I, the supposed victim, was now the master of my own fate. The corner office was everything I'd imagined it would be. The view of the city skyline, a glittering tapestry of steel and glass, felt like a personal triumph. I ran a hand over the polished mahogany of the desk that was now mine, a small, satisfied smile playing on my lips. Atlas Innovations was finally where it belonged, under my complete control. The journey had been long, riddled with deceit, but every lie, every feigned tear had been worth it. A knock on the door pulled me from my reverie. My new assistant, a bright-eyed young woman named Chloe, entered with a folder. "It's from the legal department, Ms. Hayes. All the final papers from the acquisition." She placed the folder on my desk, her expression a mix of awe and respect. She didn't know the truth, of course. No one did except for Adam, and he was in no position to speak. I signed the papers with a flourish, the pen gliding across the page as I sealed my victory. "Thank you, Chloe. You can go now." She left, and I was alone again, left with my thoughts and my victory. I pictured Adam sitting in some sterile office talking to a therapist about his breakdown. The papers I'd forged, the false accusations I'd levied against him, had worked like a charm. He'd gone from brilliant innovator to emotional wreck, and the company had been more than happy to let him go. The irony was a delicious poison I was more than happy to drink. He was in therapy, trying to come to terms with a reality I had meticulously created for him. A reality in which he was the villain, the one who had driven his own company into the ground. A ping from my phone drew my attention to a text message, a picture of a small, nondescript house in the suburbs. The address was in the suburbs, far from the life he once knew. The message read, "He's moved in. The therapist says he's making good progress." I didn't reply. It wasn't necessary. The pieces were all in place and the game was over. I had won. I looked out at the city, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The world was my oyster and I was the pearl. I had taken what I deserved, and no one would ever question how I got it. The past was buried, and the future was a clean slate, a blank canvas waiting for my touch. I was finally free. The polished mahogany of my father's desk felt cool against my fingertips. I ran my hand over the intricate carvings, a silent tribute to the man who had built this company, this legacy, with integrity and hard work. He had taught me about watches, about the delicate dance of gears and springs, but he hadn't taught me about the treacherous dance of human greed. That was a lesson I had to learn on my own, and the tuition had been paid in heartbreak and sleepless nights. My victory felt both euphoric and deeply tiring, a testament to the emotional and mental toll of what I had done. I looked at the framed photograph on the desk. My father, smiling, his arm around a young, naive me. The girl in that picture was a stranger now. She was the one who had seen Beth and Mark's financial struggles as a shared problem, who had believed their hollow words of sympathy. She was a victim waiting to happen. The woman who sat here now, her fingers tracing the wood, was a survivor. A mastermind. I had shed my skin, a painful but necessary metamorphosis from a trusting heiress into a shrewd businesswoman. The media had sensationalized the entire affair, shifting the narrative from Hayes Harris grieves stolen fortune to brilliant businesswoman exposes elaborate family fraud. It was a much more accurate headline, and the small secret thrill it gave me was a quiet reward. The satisfaction wasn't from their public humiliation, though I'd be lying if I said it wasn't a sweet side dish. The true victory was reclaiming what was rightfully mine. I had protected my father's life's work, not just the physical collection, but the very honor of his name. I had upheld his legacy against those who would have sold it for parts. I had learned that trust is a privilege, not a given. I learned that kindness is often mistaken for weakness, but most importantly, I learned that knowledge is the ultimate weapon. I didn't win this by being stronger or louder. I won because I knew them. I knew their desperation. I knew their greed. And I knew how to bait a trap they couldn't resist. They had been so consumed by their own avarice that they didn't see the noose I was weaving until it was around their necks. My phone buzzed with an email from the company's new CFO, an ally I had quietly brought in during my convalescence. We were ready to move forward with the next phase of the company's growth. No more threats from within, just clear strategic thinking. I had spent so long reacting to their schemes. Now I was finally the one in control. I stood and walked to the window looking out over the city. The lights of the skyline glittered like so many opportunities. The past was a closed book, a painful chapter I had finally finished. The future, however, was a blank page, and I was holding the pen. I knew exactly what I was going to write. My journey wasn't over. It had just truly begun. The coffee in my hands had gone cold, but I didn't mind. The chill in the mug was a familiar companion, much like the quiet that had fallen between Adam and me. He sat on the opposite end of the sofa, his shoulders slumped, the picture of a man utterly defeated. The Adam I knew, the arrogant, charming man I'd spent years fighting and loving, was gone. In his place was this shell, and I was the one who had cracked him. The thought brought a strange, sharp sense of satisfaction. My plan was working. I have to be honest with you, I said, my voice soft, almost a whisper. I watched his head lift, his eyes once so full of fire, now just tired pools of remorse. This was the moment, the final piece of the puzzle. I used you. You were a pawn in my game. The admission, stripped of all emotion, was my most powerful move yet. It wasn't an apology. It was a reclamation of power. I was showing him the cards I had played, a master revealing her strategy. He flinched, the words landing with a fresh blow. For a fleeting second, I almost felt a flicker of something. Maybe guilt. But it was fleeting. This wasn't about guilt. This was about control. This was about building a new foundation, a relationship based on the truth of who I was, not the lie he had believed. I know, he said, his voice raw. I saw it all at the end. The documents, the way you manipulated Beth, the way you broke me down, piece by piece. He took a deep, shuddering breath. I deserved it. All of it. My brows furrowed slightly, a carefully practiced expression of genuine sorrow. Adam, no. You didn't deserve it. You were just a part of something that had to happen. He shook his head, running a hand over his face. I wasn't a good husband. Not really. I was selfish, a coward. I let them manipulate me, let them poison our relationship. I'm so sorry. For everything. His apology was unexpected, but not surprising. It was the final fracture. He had no more pride to protect, no more lies to hide behind. He was a blank slate, and I was holding the chalk. I leaned forward, placing my cold mug on the coffee table. We can fix this, I said, a faint smile touching my lips. We can start over. I reached for his hand, and he didn't pull away. The feel of his skin was cool against mine, a far cry from the passion we once shared. But passion wasn't what I needed anymore. I needed an ally, a loyal one, and I had him. My grip tightened. He had been a broken man. Now he was a man rebuilt, and I was the architect. The most difficult part of my plan was complete. All I had to do now was decide what we would build together. I sat in the quiet of my living room, the afternoon light soft and forgiving. The framed photograph on the mantel caught my eye, a picture of my mother and me taken years ago before everything. Before the betrayal, before the secrets, before the grand plan. I ran a finger over the smooth glass, remembering the day she confessed everything to the board. The moment she betrayed me. At the time, I'd felt a searing, physical pain, as though a part of me had been ripped away. Now, a slow, knowing smile touched my lips. I understood everything. Her confession wasn't a betrayal, it was a sacrifice. A final, crucial piece of a trap we had both been building, silently and separately, for years. I knew she had always seen through Sarah's transparent greed, just as I had. My mother's confession, painting me as an accomplice in a scheme to deceive, wasn't a surrender. It was a calculated move to push Sarah into a corner, to make her feel invincible. It was designed to make Sarah believe she had won, that the family was divided and broken, leaving her a clear path to take control. The board's initial shock, the way they looked at me with pity and disdain, the quiet phone calls from family friends, it was all part of the charade. My mother knew that by isolating me, by making me appear to have no one left, she was giving me the freedom to move. She knew Sarah would drop her guard, that she would stop looking for a threat from within. The confession was her brilliant way of saying, I'm still here, and I am still on your side. It was her message to me, a signal that the final act was in my hands. The anger I'd felt at her supposed disloyalty had been a real emotion, but it was also a necessary cover. It was the perfect mask to wear for the rest of the world, a performance that fooled even those closest to us. My mother taught me that a master strategist doesn't just play the cards they are dealt. They make their opponent believe they have the wrong deck entirely. We were never a family divided. We were a two-person army, and she was my silent partner. Our bond, forged not by blood alone but by this shared secret and this shared vengeance, was unbreakable. It was a silent understanding that transcended words. I finally forgave her, not for the confession itself, but for the part of me that had ever doubted her loyalty. The board, the company, Sarah's downfall, all of it was simply a byproduct of my mother's love. But this wasn't the end. There were still other pieces on the board, other debts to collect, and I had learned from the best. Now it was time to play my final hand. The first thing I did was change my name. A new name, a new life. It wasn't about erasing the old me. the me who was a shadow in my own home, a pawn in my own family. It was about claiming the person I was always meant to be. I am now Elena Vance, and the world is my chessboard. My office overlooks the city, a sprawling testament to the empire I've built from the ashes of my past. My assistant, a sharp young woman named Maya, places a steaming cup of tea on my desk. "The quarterly reports for the subsidiary are ready for your review, Mrs. Vance," she says, her voice respectful. I nod, a ghost of a smile on my face. She doesn't know the truth of my past, of the company I once helped my family build, only for them to discard me when I became an inconvenience. She sees only a successful, formidable CEO, and that's exactly how I want it. But the real game is far from over. I look out at the city, at the towering skyscraper that houses my old life. A small, almost imperceptible screen in the corner of my desk flickers to life, showing a live feed. My parents, their faces etched with worry, are in a heated argument with my brother. They're discussing the latest financial reports, the ones I've meticulously crafted to show a slow, steady decline. I can practically hear their panicked whispers, their accusations, their frantic search for a scapegoat. The irony is delicious. They are searching for a solution, a plan to save their company, the very plan I've already set in motion to destroy it. My brother, always so quick to dismiss my ideas, is now scrambling to find a way to plug the holes I've created in the company's finances. He doesn't know he's fighting a phantom, a ghost of a sister he never truly knew. And my parents, who once valued love and loyalty above all else, are now seeing the true cost of their betrayal. The company is bleeding money, and they are powerless to stop it. They are trapped in the very web they spun for me. The screen goes dark and I take a sip of my tea. It's bitter, just the way I like it. My old life is crumbling, and I am the architect of its destruction. But I'm not finished. I am a different person now, and I've learned that the greatest weapon is knowledge, and the greatest trap is love. And I'm about to spring the final trap. The leather of the CEO's chair was a far cry from the worn fabric of my old one. I ran my hand over the armrest, a quiet gesture of victory. The view from this office was expansive, a panorama of the city I now held in the palm of my hand. My brother had always believed this view, and this power was his birthright. But a birthright, I had learned, was something you had to earn, not something you were simply given. My new team was the beating heart of the company now. A group of fiercely loyal, innovative, and honest professionals who had seen through the lies and recognized the truth. We were a family built on respect, not on the fragile ties of blood and deceit. They filed out of the conference room, their faces alight with the energy of a successful meeting, and each one offered a genuine smile or a nod of appreciation. This was what a legacy was meant to be. Not a fragile house of cards built on falsehoods, but a foundation of shared purpose and trust. My thoughts drifted back to my mother's confession, the masterpiece of a lie she'd told for my sake. It had been her final gift to me, a bittersweet act of love that had set my plan in motion. The pain I had shown had been real in a way. The heartbreak of a family torn apart by greed had been a legitimate wound, even if my own motives were a calculated response to it. But my brother, blinded by his wife's ambition, had seen only an opportunity. He had not seen my strength, only my vulnerability. He had not seen a sister who loved him, but a pawn to be sacrificed. The irony was not lost on me. He was gone now, his signature on the papers a silent monument to his own downfall. Sarah, his opportunistic wife, had vanished into the obscurity she so rightly deserved, taking with her the life of lavish lies she had always craved. My brother had been given a choice, a final chance to choose me over his ambition, and he had made his bed. And now I was home, not in the sense of a physical building, but in the sense of being exactly where I was meant to be. I was the architect of this fate, the mastermind behind every twist and turn. The tears and the terror of the past were not my end. They were my tools. My own destiny was a construction of my will, a testament to my strength. And as I looked out at the city, I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that this was just the beginning.